All right, so get ready, because today we're taking a deep dive into some really fascinating stuff. We're talking about unconventional archaeology, really pushing the boundaries of what we think we know about human origins and our past.
And when we talk about pushing boundaries, Michael Cremo is definitely a name that comes to mind.
Yeah, he's even been called the forbidden archaeologist,
It's
right?
exactly. I mean, his work really digs deep into these mysteries, things that mainstream science is sometimes, well, maybe a little hesitant to fully embrace.
Kind of like looking at things from a totally different angle.
Right. And for this deep dive, we're focusing on a recent trip he took to South Africa, a place that's like a gold mine for archaeological discoveries.
And not just any trip either. This was for Ubuntu Fest. I mean, have you ever heard of an event that combines music, alternative research, and, well, basically this whole vibrant exchange of ideas?
It sounds like quite a gathering, and from what I understand, they had some pretty big names there too. Sam Osmanagic, the one researching those Bosnian pyramids.
Oh, wow. Yeah, I've heard of that. But wait, you said and? Who else was there?
Robert Salas was there, the UFO researcher.
No way. That's like a total melting pot of different fields and perspectives.
It really was. And one thing that really struck me was how Cremo talked about South Africa. This was his fourth trip there, and he said he found it incredibly welcoming.
Really? That's interesting, given, how some news might portray it.
I know, right? But he said he felt this real openness from people there, this willingness to explore, like, the big questions, even if they challenge conventional thinking.
So what was Cremo's talk at this Ubuntu Fest all about?
He called it human antiquity, origins and purpose.
Okay, so not just how old humanity is, but why we're even here.
Exactly. And this is where his concept of consciousness comes in, which is a big part of his work.
Okay, now I gotta ask, what does he even mean by consciousness when it comes to, like, archaeology?
Well, he's not just looking at humans as biological beings, right? He's
Okay.
talking about something more, this idea that we are beings of consciousness.
So there's a deeper connection there to our origins.
Exactly. And that connection plays a huge role in how he approaches his research. He's not just digging up artifacts and calling it a day. He's trying to understand the bigger picture, the why behind it all. And it gets even more interesting.
Oh.
How so?
Well, Cremo's a member of ISKCON.
The International Society for Krishna Consciousness.
That's the one. And they have a pretty big presence in Durban, South Africa. In fact, even Nelson Mandela visited their center there at one point.
Seriously? Wow, that's pretty significant.
It is. And it kind of highlights this theme of unity that runs through both Mandela's legacy and I think through a lot of Cremo's work. It's this fascinating blend of like social activism, spiritual exploration, and of course this whole realm of unconventional knowledge.
It's like they're all connected in some way. But speaking of unconventional knowledge, are you ready for a story that sounds straight out of an Indiana Jones film?
I'm all ears.
So there was this South African paleontologist named Jackie Robinson. And no, not the baseball player.
Okay, I was going to say. All right. Anyway, this Jackie Robinson made some really important discoveries at the Sterkfontein Caves, specifically with Australopithecus, those early hominids?
Right, I know who you're talking about. But what does this have to do with Indiana Jones?
Well, get this. Robinson sometimes collaborated with a psychic on his work.
Wait, a psychic? You're serious?
Totally serious.
Yeah.
His name was Jeffrey Hodson, and he was part of the Theosophical Society. And get this, Robinson would actually place these fossils on Hodson's forehead, and Hodson would try to tap into, like, the energy or the memories held within the artifact.
You're kidding. What did he say he saw?
He would describe these vivid scenes from millions of years ago as if he were actually there.
That is wild. And I mean, it really makes you wonder about all the different ways we can explore the past, even if they seem a little, well, unconventional.
Absolutely. It's like we're only just scratching the surface of what we might be able to discover if we just open our minds a bit. But how did people react when Cremo shared this story?
He actually talked about it at the World Archaeological Congress. And let's just say it definitely sparked some interesting conversations.
I can imagine. But that's the thing about Cremo's work. He's not afraid to bring in these different perspectives, even if they challenge the status quo. And a lot of his work draws on Vedic cosmology. So for those of us who might not be familiar with it, what exactly is Vedic cosmology and how does it tie into all of this?
Well, Vedic cosmology comes from ancient Indian texts called the Vedas, and they offer a completely different way of looking at technology, at time, even at history itself. We're talking about flying machines, lost cities, and this concept of cyclical time that really makes you rethink everything you thought you knew about the past.
Okay, now you've definitely got my attention. Flying machines, lost cities, cyclical time. It almost sounds too incredible to be true.
I know, right? It sounds like something out of a science fiction novel, but that's the beauty of it. It pushes the boundaries of what we think is possible.
All right, let's break this down a bit. First up, flying machines. You've got to tell me more about that.
Okay, so in these Vedic texts, they describe these ancient flying vehicles called vimanas. And we're not talking about simple hot air balloons here. We're talking about sophisticated crafts that were said to be capable of not just flying through the air, but potentially even traveling through different dimensions.
Wait, hold on. Different dimensions. Are you serious?
That's what they say.
Wow. Okay, that is mind-blowing. But are there any detailed descriptions of these vimanas in the Vedic text? Like, what were they made of? How did they supposedly work?
Oh yeah, there are. Quite detailed, actually. They talk about them being made from all sorts of materials, like metals, and often with these really elaborate designs. Can you imagine?
Wow, so they put a lot of thought into these descriptions. It wasn't just like, oh, and then this flying thing appeared.
Exactly. But I think the most mind-boggling part is this concept that they could travel through different planes of existence. Like, whoa.
I know, right? Dimensional travel. That's like next level stuff. It really makes you wonder.
It's like, what if our understanding of physics and technology is just like the tip of the iceberg?
Totally. And this is where I can't help but think about Cremo being at this Ubuntu Fest with Robert Salas.
Oh, right. The UFO researcher.
Yeah. I mean, is it possible that there's a connection between these ancient accounts of flying machines and, like, modern-day UFO sightings?
Now, that is a question that Cremo finds super intriguing. Think about it. You have these crazy, detailed descriptions in these really old texts.
Right, like they weren't just making stuff up.
Right. And then fast forward to today, and you have all these reports of UFOs doing things that seem to, like, defy our understanding of how things are supposed to fly. It's definitely a thought-provoking connection.
It's like, what if they knew something back then that we're only just now starting to rediscover?
Exactly. Okay, but we've got to get to these lost cities you mentioned. This is where Dwarka comes in, right?
Oh, yeah, Dwarka.
Yeah.
So tell us about this lost city. What's the story there?
Well, the story goes that Dwarka was this incredible city, we're talking thousands of years ago, that eventually got swallowed up by the ocean.
Submerged, like Atlantis.
Kind of, yeah. And it's described in these ancient Hindu scriptures as this magnificent place full of, like, palaces and temples and all sorts of wonders.
It sounds amazing. But is there any actual evidence to support this, or is it just, like, legend and myth?
Well, that's the really interesting part. Recently, there have been some underwater expeditions off the coast of India, and get this, they've actually found remnants of structures down there that seem to match up with the descriptions in those ancient texts.
No way. So there's a chance that this lost city, which might even be older than some of the civilizations we know about, is actually sitting down there on the ocean floor.
It's definitely a possibility. And it just goes to show how much we still don't know about our past and the civilizations that came before us. But there's another piece to this whole Vedic cosmology puzzle we should talk about.
Oh, right. You mentioned something earlier about cyclical time.
Exactly. So instead of seeing time as this straight line, Vedic cosmology views it more like a cycle. Yeah, like a wheel that keeps turning with different ages or epochs, each with its own unique qualities and spiritual significance. And get this, we're currently in what they call the Kali Yuga.
Kali Yuga. What's that all about?
Well, it's often described as a time of, like, conflict, decline, and spiritual darkness.
So, not the best time to be alive, huh?
Well, the thing is, just like day follows night, Vedic cosmology suggests that a golden age will eventually follow this period of darkness. It's all part of the cycle.
Okay, so it's not about, like, progress in a straight line, but more like this ebb and flow, this constant cycle of rise and fall. And where do we fit into all of this? I mean, humanity today.
That's a question that Cremo explores pretty deeply in his work. He sees our current era, challenging as it may be, as a necessary part of this larger cosmic dance.
So it's not all doom and gloom.
Not at all. It's about recognizing the patterns, learning the lessons from each age, and maybe even understanding our role in the grand scheme of things a bit better. But you know, one of the things I find most fascinating about Cremo's work is how he connects these ancient texts and concepts to modern-day discoveries.
Oh yeah, it's like he's drawing these lines across time, linking the past and the present in these unexpected ways. And isn't this where the Silurian hypothesis comes in?
Exactly. You're good at this.
Well, I do my research. So the Silurian hypothesis, break that down for us. What is it all about?
Okay, so picture this. What if Millions of years ago, long before we humans were even a blip on the radar, there was another advanced technological species right here on Earth.
Wait, are we talking like before the dinosaurs even?
We're talking hundreds of millions of years ago, way, way back, the Silurian period, hence the name.
That's almost impossible to even imagine. But if that's true, wouldn't there be, like, more evidence, more obvious signs that they were here?
You'd think so, right? And that's one of the main arguments against the Silurian hypothesis. But the proponents of this theory say that any evidence of a civilization that old would be incredibly difficult to find.
Why is that?
Well, think about it. We're talking about vast stretches of geological time.
Like, way longer than we can even really comprehend.
Exactly. And over those millions of years, you've got earthquakes, erosion, continents shifting, all sorts of things happening that could have easily wiped out any trace of their existence.
So it's possible that the evidence is out there, buried deep down somewhere, but it's just like a matter of knowing what to look for and where to find it.
That's the idea, and it might not be the kind of evidence we're used to looking for. Instead of fossils and traditional archaeological remains, we might need to search for things like synthetic materials, things that could have survived for eons.
Like what? Give me an example.
Well, some researchers talk about looking for isotopic anomalies in the geological record.
Isotopic anomalies. Now you're just using big words to make me feel clueless.
Okay, sorry. It's like, imagine finding a fingerprint. Not a literal fingerprint, but like a chemical fingerprint that just doesn't belong in that time period. It would suggest that something or someone was messing around with technology that shouldn't have existed back then.
Okay, I get it.
Yeah.
It's like finding a smartphone buried in a dinosaur bone. It would definitely raise some eyebrows.
Exactly. And this is where Cremo often points to certain discoveries, things that just don't quite fit with the conventional timeline of human history. Like that discovery we talked about earlier with the human bones found in those Silurian-era rock layers.
Oh, right. The ones that were like hundreds of millions of years old.
Exactly. I mean, that's way before humans were supposed to have even existed.
So how does mainstream science explain that?
Well, they offer different theories. Maybe those bones belong to some other type of hominid or even to intelligent reptiles. Who knows?
Intelligent reptiles. Okay, now that's a whole other deep dive.
Right. But Cremo, he sees it as a reason to like step back and reconsider what we think we know.
To be open to the possibility that maybe we weren't the first intelligent beings on this planet.
Exactly. That maybe there were other civilizations long gone who might have even been more advanced than us, millions of years before we came along.
It's a pretty mind-blowing thought. And it makes you wonder, if it happened once, let's just say it didn't happen multiple times throughout Earth's history.
It really makes you question everything. Like, what if we're just one small chapter in a much, much larger story?
And that seems to be a running theme with Cremo's work. It's not just about digging up bones and artifacts. It's about searching for a deeper meaning, trying to understand how we fit into this whole grand cosmic puzzle.
Absolutely. He's trying to connect the dots between our past, our present, and even our future. And to do that, he's drawing on these ancient traditions, these different ways of seeing the world that maybe modern science has kind of forgotten about.
It's like he's saying, hey, maybe we don't have all the answers. Maybe there's more to discover if we're just willing to look beyond our current understanding.
Exactly. And that's what I think makes this whole deep dive so fascinating. It challenges us to question our assumptions, to expand our awareness, and to be open to the possibility that reality might be a lot more mysterious and a lot more wondrous than we ever imagined.
It really makes you think, doesn't it? Like, what if we're just scratching the surface of what's really out there? What if the past holds secrets that could completely change our understanding of ourselves and the universe? If you could hop in a time machine, where would you even begin to look for answers? Oh, that's something to ponder, isn't it? And on that note, we're going to wrap up this deep dive into the world of Michael Cremo, the forbidden archaeologist. Be sure to check out his work if you're intrigued by these big questions about human history and our place in the cosmos. And until next time, keep exploring, keep questioning, and keep an open mind. You never know what you might discover.